any mention of the Yellow Brick Road, the Ruby Slippers, or Dorothy Gale, most people will think of the 1939 musical, The Wizard of Oz. And few actually think of the 1985 Disney film, Return to Oz. It is often thought of as a dream, a film that was short-lived, and a film that failed to capitalize on the success of The Wizard of Oz. But is this the true story of Disney's vision of Oz? Did they make a direct sequel to the 1939 musical? To understand this, we must first understand how far the Oz stories have come. Prior to the 1939 musical, The Wizard of Oz had been performed successfully on stage since the 20s and 30s. Some say this is where the 1939 film grew from, giving it a vaudeville style. The Wizard of Oz film was more in tune with the book than the stage production, but vaudeville was the style they decided to use. An example of this style would be the painted backdrops and the padded suits of the characters of Oz. In the film's defense, The Wizard of Oz for its time had state-of-the-art visual effects. But the theatrical style was apparently intentional, and it seemed to help the film along. When The Wizard of Oz debuted, it was not as successful as one might think. It wasn't until after the war that it became an instant hit. And since then, The Wizard of Oz has seemed to increase in popularity each generation. The writer of the Oz stories, L. Frank Baum, wrote a total of 14 books based on the magical land of Oz. MGM had only created the first of the stories into a live-action film. Disney owned the rights to the other 13 books, and those later adventures are the stories director Walter Murch wanted to tell.
I like to think of it, though, as a sequel, really, a sequel to one side, in a sense. It's not a musical. It has a different set of characters in it. It is using film techniques that have been developed over the last 45 years since the previous Judy Garland film was made.
Return to Oz was set up to be a different story altogether. But the perceiving of the film as a sequel to the 1939 musical The Wizard of Oz haunted Disney's Return to Oz since the beginning of production. Walter Murch and his crew were not interested in making a sequel to the 1939 film. Gary Kurtz said it best when he said, "A film reflects the time in which it is made." Since The Wizard of Oz was filmed in the 30s, it would be impossible to imitate that now. One of the main reasons this would not work is that Judy Garland is already deceased, and they would never be able to recast the mode of Judy. Instead, they cast Dorothy to be more age-appropriate to the original books. 9-year-old actress Fairuza Balk would be cast to play the infamous role.
Oh, no.
It's just a yellow brick.
No, Bellina, you don't understand. This was the Yellow Brick Road.
Oh.
It leads to the Emerald City.
Return to Oz was also decided early on not to be a musical, and not to be in the vaudeville tradition of The Wizard of Oz. They instead decided to center on the fantasy adventure aspect of the Baum stories. If anything, Return to Oz was created as a sequel to the Wizard of Oz book, not the film. This was somewhat confusing to audiences, however, when Return to Oz decided to use two keen aspects of the 1939 version of Dorothy. They gave Dorothy braids and even included the infamous ruby slippers.
Are you sure you didn't come back for these?
My ruby slippers.
No. My ruby slippers. They just fell out of the sky one day. She was so anxious to get home. They're very powerful. They made it possible for me to conquer the Emerald City. Thank you.
This decision was meant to help audiences transition from MGM's interpretation of Oz over to Disney's. But it seemed just to confuse audiences into thinking it was a sequel to the 1939 film.
This was supposed to be the film that was more true to the Oz books. But they made changes from the book it was based on, and they still made a trashy picture, a trashy-looking film with none of the joys of the classic Judy Garland Oz film.
This movie was amazing. It starts out with Dorothy being left overnight at the house of a strange surgeon.
Unbelievable.
Then she's given shock treatments. Then she's swept away in a flood. By the time the movie is half an hour old, the kids in the audience are probably scared to
Terrified.
death. It was not an upbeat children's film.
Absolutely wrong, and I was so glad that the audience rejected it. Unfortunately, I had to see it first.
Arguably, the film's demise was that it was perceived as a sequel. And not even all the news articles in the world stating it is not a sequel would make any difference. While all Disney's decisions in Return to Oz may not have been entirely correct, Walter's vision developed the most state-of-the-art special effects for its time, and the final outcome is nothing short of spectacular.
What do you think?
I think you're very beautiful.
I should hope so.
Just who might you be? What are you doing here?
I'm Dorothy Gale.
Dorothy Gale.
Dorothy Gale. Make sure you do the head so we can see where it's going.
It's not working.
Oh, there must have been some magic words.
What were they? Think.
Think?
You've got to remember.
I wasn't alive then. How can I remember?
Read the directions, Dorothy.
I don't know these words.
Read them anyway.
Weog, Teog, Peog. We did
If you get a chance, return to Oz once more. You might just be surprised.